The door was secure, sealed shut. But the instant the monks walked into the hospital ward that morning, the scene they encountered caused them to stop dead in their tracks. Martin de Porres was there. He was tending to a dying slave. "How did you get in?" they shouted. "The doors were locked. We have the keys." Martin smiled calmly. God always has a way for those in need. God's peace be upon you, my brothers. The Bible says, "The Lord does not look at the things people look at." People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. The story I am going to tell you today will shake the world. It is the true story of a man who was insulted as a mulatto dog, but who was eventually declared a saint. If you are ever told you are not good enough, I am telling this story for you. If you have been rejected because of your race, your color, or your past, this story is for you. Because Martin de Porres proved that the impossible is possible. December 9th, 1579. Lima, Peru. Ana Velasquez was writhing in labor pains. When the midwife arrived, the condition of the room was obvious. A poor hut, an old bed, even clean water was scarce. Anna was a free woman, but her past still followed her. She was the granddaughter of a man who had been captured and enslaved in Panama, and now she was giving birth to the illegitimate child of a Spanish nobleman. When the baby was born, the midwife hesitated for a moment. The child's skin was darker than it should have been. It was like his mother's skin. It was black. The midwife was astonished. She couldn't believe her eyes. "My God," whispered the midwife, "his father will never accept this child." When Anna took the baby in her arms, she looked at him and couldn't hold back her tears. But these were not tears of pain. "God gave you to me," she whispered to her baby. "You are my Martin, and you are a very special baby." The next day, Don Juan de Porres, one of the wealthiest Spanish noblemen in Lima, visited Ana. When he saw the baby, he couldn't hide the expression on his face. "No," he said to himself, "this child is too black. This cannot be my child," he said. "He is your son," Ana said calmly, thinking the father would accept his son. Don Juan replied harshly, "No, if he were my son, he would look like a Spaniard. This child cannot be mine. Think of my position in the empire. What would happen if I accepted a black child as my son? What would people think?" And that day, Don Juan left and never returned. I ask you, in such a situation, would you reject your child just because their color is different? Would you turn a blind eye to your child living in hunger and misery just because they are black? Ana Velasquez suddenly found herself alone. She had 2 children to raise, Martin and his sister Juana, who would arrive just 2 years later. To put food on the table, she made a meager living washing other people's laundry. Her shift began before the sun even rose, stretching for 12 brutal hours a day. Her hands were permanently cracked, and her back was constantly aching. She felt she simply had no strength left to continue living this life. But little Martin was very different from his peers. When he was only 3 years old, he started asking his mother questions. "Mom, why do people hate us?" Anna stopped. How could she explain this to a tiny child? "They don't hate us, son. It's just that they see that we are different. They aren't used to seeing different-colored people like us," she said, swallowing hard. "But God created us too, right? Then why do they think we are different?" Anna looked at her son and realized he was no ordinary child. The first miracle happened when Martin was only 5 years old. He discovered a gravely wounded dog lying on the street. Its leg was shattered and it was bleeding heavily. While the other children fled in fear, little Martin walked right up to the injured animal. He placed his small hands gently on the dog and began to pray. Only moments later the dog sprang to its feet and ran off, completely healed, as if the injury had never occurred. A woman passing by witnessed Martin's miracle and screamed, "This must be a miracle! This child healed a wounded dog just by praying." But Martin said nothing. He ran home and hugged his mother. Gossip began to spread quickly through the neighborhood. There is something strange about Anna's black son. It's as if he performs God's miracles. But at first, not everyone believed it. Some laughed arrogantly. A black child performing miracles? That is nonsense. When Martin turned 8, an unexpected change happened in his life. His father, Don Juan de Porres, returned out of guilt. "Where is my son? I want to see him," he said to Anna. When he looked through the door, he saw 8-year-old Martin. To him, the child was still a black, but in his eyes, there was something in his eyes. There was the sparkle of God, wisdom, love, purity. You are my son," said Don Juan slowly. "Yes, father," Martin replied with humility. Don Juan made a decision that day. "I will officially accept you as my son, and I will provide you with a good life." This was not an easy decision in the Spain of that era. In Spanish society, for a nobleman to accept a black child was a scandal, but it didn't matter to Don Juan. When Martin turned 12, Don Juan placed him as an apprentice to a barber surgeon. Back then, barbers didn't just cut hair, they also performed surgery, prepared medicines, and treated wounds. The master barber, Marcel de Rivero, did not accept the situation when he first saw Martin. "A black boy? My customers won't accept this. You will ruin my shop," he said. But a week later, Marcel was amazed. Martin had incredible talents. His hands seemed to distribute God's healing. Patients started lining up for Martin to treat them. And finally, Marcel admitted, "This boy is better than me. God has given him a special gift." While he was an apprentice, Martin spent hours in the church at night. His landlady, Ventura de Luna, was curious. One night, she secretly looked through the keyhole, and what she saw shocked her. Martin was floating in the air, a meter off the ground. He was praying, his eyes closed, his face glowing with light. Ventura was shocked. She stumbled back and fell to the floor. This cannot be real. This boy is a saint." The next morning, when she asked Martin, the young man was embarrassed. "Please, don't tell anyone. I was just talking to God." When Martin turned 15, he made his final decision. He went to Ventura de Luna. "I want to go to the Dominican convent." "But Martin," said Ventura gently, "you know, the laws forbid blacks from entering the religious order." "I know," said Martin calmly. "I know I won't be a friar. I will just be a servant, a donado. I too want to serve in God's way." When he went to the Dominican convent of the Rosary, the prior Juan de Lorenzana was surprised. No black person had ever come to this monastery before. You want to be a servant? But you are an educated barber. You have a respectable profession. Do you really want to do this?" "True service is done with humility," said Martin. "I am willing to do even the filthiest jobs." Juan de Lorenzana saw something special in this young man. "All right, we accept you." When Martin entered the monastery, he was given the filthiest tasks: cleaning the toilets, doing the laundry, kitchen work, cleaning the stables. And Martin accepted all of them with joy. But some monks didn't like this. "What is a black doing here?" grumbled a monk. "This is a holy place. They have no business here." One day, a young priest approached Martin and shouted in his face, "Mulatto dog, what are you doing here? Go back to where you came from. You have no business in God's house. You are the grandson of slaves." Martin bowed his head. "You are right, Father. I am truly unworthy, but God called me to be here." This humility surprised the priest. He had humiliated him, but Martin responded with love. Martin's first years in the monastery were very hard. He slept 4 hours a day. The rest he spent working and praying. He got up at 4 in the morning, cleaned the entire monastery, visited the sick, took care of them, worked in the kitchen, and prayed until late at night. A monk was very surprised that Martin worked so much, and finally he asked, "Martin, don't you ever get tired?" "There is no tiredness when working for God," said Martin, smiling. But strange things started to happen. Monks keeping the night watch saw a light filtering from Martin's room. When they looked inside, Martin was levitating in the air. They were shocked by what they saw. What about you? If you saw something like this, would you believe it, or would you think you were hallucinating? Another night, there was no food left in the kitchen. There wasn't enough for the monks. Martin prayed and took a small piece of bread. Then he started distributing it, and the bread didn't run out that night. Everyone ate their fill, but the bread was still there. Facing this miracle, the monks froze. "How did this happen?" asked the cook. "God provides," said Martin simply. His most famous miracle happened with the mice. The monastery was full of mice gnawing on the monks' valuable robes. "We must put down poison," said a monk. "No," objected Martin. "They are also creatures created by God. They are no different from us." "Then what shall we do?" asked the monk. Martin bent down and caught a mouse with his hand. Looking at the mouse, he began to speak. "Little brother, why do you and your friends cause us so much harm? Listen, I won't kill you. But gather all your friends and take them to the garden wall. I will bring you food every day, but leave the wardrobes alone." And then something incredible happened. The mouse lifted its front paws, as if saying thank you. Then Martin put the mouse down, and it ran away. Within a few minutes, hundreds of mice came out of the monastery, one after another, just like a parade. They went to the garden wall and made a nest there. The monks couldn't believe it. This is impossible. But Martin fed the mice every day, and they never entered the monastery again. Martin's fame began to spread all over Lima. Sick people came to him. Rich, poor, slaves, nobles, it didn't matter. He treated everyone with the same love. One day, a Spanish nobleman arrived. "Friar Martin, my son is dying. The doctors can't do anything." Martin went to see the child. He had a high fever and was unconscious. Martin put his hand on the child's forehead and prayed. A few minutes later, the child opened his eyes. "Mom, I'm hungry." The nobleman wept. You have performed a miracle." "No," said Martin. "God performed the miracle. I was just an instrument." But the greatest miracle was this: Martin never discriminated. One day, he found a slave brought from Africa on the street. The man had been stabbed and was losing blood. Martin took him in his arms and carried him to his own bed in the infirmary. When the prior found out, he was furious. "Martin, you put a dirty slave in your own bed? He is ruining our clean sheets." Martin replied calmly, "Forgive me, Father Prior. Please forgive me. I didn't know that the precept of obedience came before the precept of charity." The prior stopped. What could he say to that answer? "Go," he said in a soft voice. "Follow the voice of your heart, Martin." From that day on, Martin was given full authority. He could help whoever he wanted. When Martin turned 24, Prior Juan de Lorenzana made him a special offer. "Martin, you have been serving here for 8 years. Everyone loves you. You do things no one else could do. I want to make you a friar." Martin was shocked. "But Father Prior, our laws do not allow it. Blacks cannot enter the religious order." "I will handle the laws," said Juan de Lorenzana with determination. "You are chosen by God. You will take your vows." In 1603, Martin de Porres officially became a friar. This was an unprecedented event in the history of Peru. Martin became the first friar of black origin in history, but not everyone was happy about this. "It is shameful," shouted an old monk. "A black taking holy vows. What has happened to our religion?" Another priest spat in Martin's face. "Illegitimate, grandson of slaves, you don't belong here." Martin accepted these insults in silence, but something had changed. He now had more authority. The prior put him in charge of the infirmary. If you had lived in that era, would you have opposed a black person becoming a friar? Please tell us in the comments. And that was where Martin's true power emerged. Patients started coming in waves. The dying, desperate families, abandoned slaves. Martin tended to them all with the same care. One day, a terrible plague epidemic hit Lima. Hundreds of people were dying daily. Most of the monks in the monastery fell ill and were quarantined. The doors were locked. No one could enter. But one morning, the monks saw something surprising. Martin was with the sick monks. He was looking after them, giving them medicine. "How are you getting in?" they asked. "The doors are locked, and we have the keys." Martin just smiled. You cannot close God's way with a lock. The truth is, Martin could pass through locked doors. A monk saw him. Martin walked toward the closed door and passed through it, as if the door wasn't there. This wasn't just a miracle. Many monks witnessed it. But even more amazing was Martin's ability to be in two places at once. In 1610, a Spanish merchant fell ill in Mexico. He was lying alone in his room, groaning in pain. "Oh, Brother Martin," he groaned, "I wish you were here and could take care of me." At that moment, the door to the room opened, and Martin walked in. The merchant was surprised. "Martin, how did you get here? You are in Mexico." "You needed me," said Martin calmly. He cleaned the sick man's wounds, gave him medicine, and prayed with him. A few hours later, Martin left. "You will recover. God is with you." When the merchant returned to Lima months later, he went to see Martin. "Thank you for visiting me in Mexico." Martin looked surprised. "But I never left Lima. I was in the monastery that whole time." Other monks confirmed it. "Martin never left here. We saw him every day." The merchant insisted. But he was in Mexico." "I saw him. He touched me with his hands." This miracle happened again and again. People brought on slave ships from Africa said they saw Martin. A slave brought to Peru for the first time in his life recounted, "When we were in the ship's hold, in chains, it was dark. It was terrible. Then Brother Martin came. He brought us bread and water. He spoke to us of Jesus' love. He gave us hope." "But that is impossible," said the monk. "Martin never left Peru." "I saw him," insisted the slave. "He touched me." Missionaries in Japan said the same thing. They said they saw Martin, that he looked after the sick and spoke Japanese. But Martin was in Lima, every day. He had never left. "It is a miracle of God," said the prior. "Martin is so holy that God sends him where he is needed." At that time, Martin's relationship with animals also became legendary. He could talk not only to mice, but to all animals. One day, a wild dog entered the monastery. The dog was furious. It looked like it had rabies. The monks were shouting in fear, "We must kill it!" Martin approached. "No. Let me talk to him." He looked into the dog's eyes and spoke with a soft voice. The dog calmed down. It sat on the ground. Martin petted it. "He is sick," said Martin. "He is in pain. I will heal him." A week later, the dog was completely healed and became Martin's most faithful friend. Once, something happened in the monastery garden that no one had ever seen before. A dog, a cat, and a mouse were eating from the same plate. The three together, like brothers, in peace. "This is not natural," said a monk. "This is God's love," said Martin. "Peace is possible, even among animals." Martin's biggest project was founding an orphanage and a hospital. In Lima's poorest neighborhoods, hundreds of children lived on the streets, hungry and sick. Martin went to rich Spanish families. "Help me," he said. "We need to build a place for these children." At first, they were rejected. "For black children, why?" "Because they are also God's children," said Martin calmly. His humility and persistence finally won. Rich families started donating. Martin founded the orphanage, the first non-segregated orphanage in Lima. There, Spanish children, children of African descent, and indigenous children lived together. They ate the same food, received the same lessons, and experienced the same love. "This is madness," said the viceroy. "You cannot mix the races." "In God's eyes there is no race," said Martin. "There is only love." As years passed, Martin's fame spread not only through Lima, but all over the Americas. People travelled for days to see him. But Martin never changed. He was still the same humble, loving person. One day, the monastery fell into great debt. There was an economic crisis, and the monastery was about to go bankrupt. The prior held a meeting. "We must sell some valuable items, the gold crosses, the silver candlesticks." Martin stood up. "No, Father Prior, sell me." Everyone was shocked. "What? I am just a poor mulatto," said Martin calmly. "Sell me as a slave. I could be worth some money. But do not sell God's holy items." The prior burst into tears. "Martin, you are a friar of this monastery. We will never sell you." But this event showed Martin's character. He wanted nothing for himself. Everything was for others. Martin's miracles continued to be seen frequently. A young priest testified, "I decided to become a priest because I saw Brother Martin praying. He was a meter off the ground, embracing the cross. His face was glowing with light. I will never forget that moment. I saw the power of God." This was not just one person's testimony. Dozens of monks saw the same thing. The surgeon, Marcel de Rivero, the man who was Martin's master, swore, "I saw it too, elevated from the ground, in prayer." In 1639, Martin fell ill. He was 60 years old, and his body was tired from years of sacrifice. He took to his bed. All of Lima was worried. "Brother Martin is dying. We are losing our saint." The monastery filled with visitors, rich, poor, slaves, nobles. Everyone wanted to see him one last time. A slave said through tears, "You were the only person who saw me as a human being. You valued me. I will never forget you." A nobleman said, "You taught me humility. You taught me that my race does not make me superior." An orphan child said, "You were a father to me. You loved me." Martin listened to them all and smiled. "Do not cry, my dear brothers. I was just God's hand. You can do the same. Love one another. Do not discriminate. Serve those in need. That is the kingdom of God." On the night of November 3rd, 1639, Martin took his last breath. His final words were, "My God, I surrender to your will." At that moment, the room filled with a sweet perfume. The monks swore they heard angels singing. Light covered the room. Martin's funeral was one of the biggest events in Lima's history. Thousands of people attended. The viceroy declared official mourning. the city of Lima has lost a saint. But the most surprising thing happened with Martin's body. His body did not decay. Even months later, it was like the first day. It emitted a pleasant scent. When his tomb was opened 25 years later, the body was still intact. This could not be explained scientifically. Miracles began immediately. Sick people healed after praying at his tomb. Women who couldn't have children became pregnant. The poor found unexpected help. The church began keeping an official record. Hundreds, then thousands of miracles were recorded. In 1837, Pope Gregory XVI declared Martin blessed. This was the first step on the road to sainthood. But for full sainthood, more was needed. The church investigated very carefully. Especially Martin's race was the biggest issue. For a black man to be a saint was a major revolution. Finally, on May 6, 1962, Pope John III officially declared Martin de Porres a saint. This event resonated strongly alongside the civil rights movement happening in America in the 1960s. Martin Luther King Jr. was fighting for racial equality, and right at that moment, the Catholic Church declared its first black saint of the Americas. God's timing is perfect, said Pope John XXIII. Martin de Porres shows us the way of racial peace. People from all over the world came to the canonization ceremony. African Americans, Latin Americans, people of mixed race. They all gave thanks in tears. Finally, said an old woman, we have our saint. Someone who understands us, who suffered like us, but who still chose to love. Today, Saint Martin de Porres is an example for millions of people worldwide. Specifically, he is a guide for those fighting racism. Those working for social justice draw inspiration from him. Veterinarians see him as their patron saint. Doctors and nurses take him as an example. Mixed-race people find hope in him. St. Martin's most powerful message is this: in God's eyes, we are all equal. Your skin color doesn't matter. Your past doesn't matter. Your lineage doesn't matter. What matters is your heart. Martin was insulted as a mulatto dog, but he responded with love. He was rejected, but he forgave. He was humiliated, but he remained humble. And in the end, the world recognized him as a saint. If you are suffering discrimination today, remember Saint Martin. If you are judged for your race or your past, remember Saint Martin. If they tell you you are not good enough, remember Saint Martin. Because Martin proved that, in God's eyes, everyone is valuable. Everyone is worthy of love. Everyone can perform miracles. Have you ever faced racism? How did you react? Did you respond with love or with anger? Saint Martin teaches us that love conquers all. If you produce hate, you receive hate. But if you produce love, you change the world. Saint Martin de Porres, pray for us. Teach us to break down racial discrimination. Teach us to see everyone as a child of God. Teach us humility, mercy, forgiveness. And maybe, just maybe, we too can perform small miracles. Smiling at a stranger, being kind to someone who looks different, standing up against discrimination, helping the poor. These may seem like small things, but Saint Martin showed us that small acts of love change the world. Amen.